Alright, well, I want to get into the next phase of this where we covered materials, we've covered textures, and now we're going to cover UV mapping and how UV mapping affects the way the texture will show up on a polygon or a set of polygons. The first thing I want to do actually is I want to jump back to Photoshop because I need to make a change to our texture here. I made this white, and white is not going to work out very well for us in the UV editor, for this demo. So white's fine in real life, but for today, let's go ahead and change this, and this will show you how to go back and edit a texture. So let's go back to Photoshop, and I had my color fill here set to white. I'll double click on my color fill and change it to dark blue or something, or gray. There we go. Very cool. Okay. File save. Back to Maya. That's a cool Mac shortcut. Actually, is Command Tab. Toggles you or jumps you around between your open programs. So here we go we're back in Maya. It hasn't updated yet. If I right click on it and choose Material Attributes and go back to the color node here and then go to Reload here under the color tab, it will then update the image to reflect the change that we made to our file. This should make this a lot easier to see. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to this little button, which is the UV texture editor. It's also up here under the, if you're in the polygon menu, under Edit UVs, you can find it under the UV texture under there. But we'll just pick it here with our little button, which is under the polygons menu. There it is. What we see is a Cartesian coordinate here. The positive, negative x, positive y, negative x, negative y, positive x, those four coordinates of the Cartesian grid. And this is going to be U in this direction and V in this direction. So when I click on the object, sure enough, our square image shows up in that positive quadrant. So the positive quadrant is traditionally all you care about when you're doing UV texture editor, UV edits, that you want everything to fit into the positive quadrant. It'll make a little bit more sense later on. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the grid to make this a little bit easier to see. So when when I deselect the image, it just disappears from the UV texture editor, so you have to have that selected. One kind of cool quirk of the Maya windows is that even if you're in this different kind of an editor, most of the same navigation shortcuts apply. So if you hold down the Command key and middle mouse click, that's pan. If you just middle mouse wheel spin, that zooms you in and out. So those are very useful. Now what we're going to do is we talked about component level modeling, where we've talked about we have vertices, we have edges, and we have faces. And in UV texture editing, we have a new set of things to manipulate, and those are called UVs. Let me show you how that works. So if we right-click in here, we can choose UV. And UVs are brown to distinguish them from the purple verts. Vertices are purple and UVs are brown. Now, it's a little bit weird at first. They don't show up in here yet. But if you click and drag on them, they show up here and they're selected. They turn green when they're selected, and you can barely see them out here, but they're selected out here too. And then if you hit W, that gives you the manipulator, so that you can move your UVs. So the big thing to see here is that as we move the UVs, the geometry itself, the XYZ, remains unchanged. The object does not change. The image and the way the image is projected onto the image is what is changing. So if I turn the grid back on, just as kind of a little reference here, I can move this down to 0.5, which is about halfway through the circle. I didn't put the circle exactly in the middle, but it'll be close enough. And sure enough, this edge, which represents this edge of the geometry out here, is now at the halfway point of the circle. And as we move it up to here, so it touches the top of the circle, we'll see the top of the circle corresponds with this top edge of the geometry. If we move this all the way down, the circle would disappear altogether, because only this area down here, I'll turn the grid off, only this area down here is being projected onto the geometry. And if we just cheat it up a little bit here, that little bit corresponds to the top here. So we could do the same thing. We could grab a different set of UVs on the side here, and we could do the same thing on the side. We can also drag one UV around, which tends to get pretty distorted. We can also rotate the UVs, just hitting E, our normal shortcuts. That's not going to be very exciting because it's a circle. So, boo to that. I should have come up with a better demo image. Or we can scale them. R, for scale. And as we scale, and this gets bigger, the circle, as our UV gets bigger, the circle becomes smaller relative to that. Now as we go out, you'll notice it starts to tile. And that's the default setting for UVs to tile automatically. We can turn that off later, but we're not going to worry about it today. As I go down, of course, we'll see the opposite start to happen. So that as our UV gets smaller and smaller, we're showing more and more of the circle till we get to this point. The circle takes up the entire, almost the entire UV, and the circle isn't exactly the middle. So if I hit W, I can just move this around so we get a nice kind of perfect view here. And then we can hit R again, and it gets even smaller and smaller. You can see these little corners of blue out here corresponding out here. So you can make like a piece of blotter ledger or something. There you go. Alright. Until we get here, it's all red. And then I think you just figured that out. If we hit W again for move, or just go here and click the move tool, we can adjust what is being shown in the UV. And again, because of the tiling, we'll eventually get, as I move it over here, it just picks up the repeat of the circle there. So you could think about the UVs as the projector, and the corresponding polygons out here as the screen on which the projector is projecting the image. And so if you change the aspect ratio of the projector, you'll see different parts of the image.